Yeah, that's it. So once again, welcome. I will welcome you for recording purposes. This initiative has been supported by individual members of Grand Lodge of Georgia and Grand Lodge of Lithuania. These members addressed Brother Robert Cooper, who is curator of the museum and library at the Grand Lodge of Scotland for 26 years now, and asked for his lectures, which has become very informative, insightful for many participants. For not only participants, but we get a lot of positive feedbacks from QCCC. Kind of network from Facebook groups, from kind of on personal emails. So this not only participants, but the viewers of the recording are very happy that there is such an opportunity for them. So having said that, and once again emphasizing our gratefulness to our esteemed lecturer, Brother Robert Cooper, and the supporting Grand Lodges, it is my honor to give once again the floor to Brother Robert, who will present, will have his presentation as well, not only speech, which will make it more attractive and interesting, I guess, and more engaging. Thank you so much. I will mute myself, and the floor is yours, Brother Robert.
Hello. Yes, sorry, just still get myself organized. I take everybody can hear me fine? No problems? Okay. Well, thanks very much for letting me come on your show again, David. Very kind. I didn't realize anyway, you may well have realized, I didn't realize that you could actually show images from your computer through Zoom. So if I'd known that, I would have given you more images on previous lectures or previous presentations. So tonight, at other people's request, I have to say, we're going to discuss a little bit about the earliest known rituals. And of course, this is always going to be a bit of a problem because there's obviously certain elements of the rituals that we simply cannot discuss. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a PowerPoint presentation that I've kind of knocked together earlier today. It's maybe not quite as sophisticated as I would like it, but I think it does help us understand what I'm getting at. Now, because I suspect that a few people here tonight will not have tuned in to the previous presentations, I'll do a little bit of a recap, not much, and then we're going to have a look at the rituals. So I'm just going to switch now to the PowerPoint presentation, and as you'll see from the title, and of course David will have to switch on the sharing screen if he can do that, and then confirm it to me because I can't see myself now. You got that, David?
Actually, to share the screen, you don't need my permission. I can end it, but you just can do it.
All right. Okay. Right. Right. I'll see if I can find the right button to click.
It is.
I think you told me this already. Actually, it's the green
button.
It
is on the lower part of Zoom screen, and that's something's coming. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Okay.
So, you can full screen actually. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's probably better. Well, as you can see, the title of this presentation was not entirely about ritual. It was a very large presentation, a very lengthy presentation that I gave almost 2 years ago now. So please ignore the date on the bottom left corner. This was when the original presentation was written or designed. So it dealt with more than just the ritual, and I've kept some parts of that because I think you'll find some of it quite interesting. And as we've talked about in the previous presentations, my particular interest is in Freemasonry before 1717, because it's simply not, it's not something that's explored very much at all in Masonic circles. But I'm very fortunate because of the fact that I'm the curator of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. Many of these very old documents are actually in my care. And so, you know, I've looked at them over the years, and I've slowly but surely begun to understand a bit more about them. So as well as talking about the original documents, a little bit of background for you, especially for those that hadn't seen any of the previous presentations. That won't take terribly long because the main focus is, in fact, the rituals. So let's just see if we can make this work. I thought you might like to see that because that's actually the minute of the first lodge minute in the world. And as you can see right at the top there is the date 1598. And it says, on the 9th day of January in the year of God, 1598. And that's how that minute starts. So this is the minute of the Lodge of Aitchison's Haven, which begins on the 9th of January, 1599. Although the date on the document is 1598 at the top there, there's a very good reason for that change, and you'll see the date again down at the very bottom is the next entry, which is 1598 as well. And that's because in the year 1600, Scotland, which was a completely independent country at that time, its own king, its own parliament, at that time in the year 1600, Scotland adopted the new calendar and got away from the previous church calendar. And so, in fact, some documents are misdated by our modern calendar. So it's actually 1 year out. So it's 1599, and that's the reason why there's a difference in date. But I thought you might like to see that, you know, it's definitely there. The minute book is, well, maybe 100 and odd pages, and that's the very, very first or the very earliest entry in that Lodge minute book. And we've talked before about the reason why these very early records start around about this time, and this is all down to this guy. You're probably getting a bit fed up of me talking about him, but this guy William Shaw, who instructed the Lodges of Scotland to start keeping written records, and that's exactly what's happened here. So here's the very, very first one. Now let's see, we've got. So here's the Shaw statutes that I've been talking about. I'm just giving you an image of it. We're not going to translate it here, but it's just to give you an image of the actual document itself. It's very large. It's extremely well written, as you would expect. It's extremely well written. William Shaw, of course, being a very educated man, and whoever actually wrote it, and we think it was his clerk, sorry, wrong way, we think it was his clerk, Alexander Bothwell, who actually wrote this. But the style of writing, as you can see between the two documents, this one's a little bit scrappy with scoring outs and all the rest of it, whereas the actual Shaw statutes that caused the minutes to be written are a little bit better written as well. William Shaw, and again, I think this is a very nice image. This is the keystone in his tomb, and it's the keystone. You'll see his name is very clear right at the top there, William Shaw, and it's spelt the French way. Okay, are we all right? Somebody's unmuted.
Let me remind participants that please don't unmute yourself unless you are given the floor. The meeting is moderated, and it'll just interrupt the presentation. Please, if it doesn't work, I'll have to mute everyone and then unmute you. Just 1 second.
Thank you. Easily done.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, all
Then
right.
floor is yours, please.
Back to me. Right. So this is the key. This is the keystone, and of course, in Scottish Freemasonry, a keystone plays a very important part in Scottish Lodge ceremonies. But I thought you'd just like to see that this mark that you can see, which is highlighted by this is sun coming through a stained glass window of the church where the tomb is. This Mason's mark here, we think is William Shaw's own Mason's mark. Anyway, just again, and just a nice little touch. I thought I'd let you just see that because it is nice. For you, those of you who have not seen or heard his translation, the translation of what is written on the tomb, that's it there. Obviously, because we're recording this, you'll be able to pause this and look at this yourself later. But if you take your time to read it, especially towards the end, I think it gives you, certainly it gives me the feeling that this man was incredibly well respected by people in Scotland. And indeed, he was very, very much considered to be a friend by so many people, including his Queen Anne, and his friend Alexander Seton. But we'll not go into that too much here. I just thought you'd like to see that, and then you can look at that yourself later at your leisure. And that's again, sorry, another copy of the Shaw Statutes. Now, we've talked before, and I thought it was important to let you see the actual text of item 15 in the statutes, where he's talking about this art of memory. And I think this whole idea of members of the lodge having to memorize something is incredibly important. I'll read it for you because this is in Middle Scots, but this is an instruction to the warden of the lodge, who was essentially the master in those days. You will take trial of the art of memory and science thereof of every apprentice according to their vocations, and in case that they have lost any point of them, to pay the penalty as follows. So that first paragraph is setting up this test of the art of memory. So every year they are to be tried. There is a trial in their ability to memorize something. And then he goes on that every apprentice has, for every point of failure by the entered apprentice, they are to pay the following penalty for their slothfulness, for their laziness, if you like. And so that is 20 shillings for each fellow of craft and 10 shillings for every apprentice. So for every point of failure, fellows of craft have to pay 20 shillings and entered apprentices 10 shillings. So there's obviously more than 1 or 2 points here that have to be memorized. He's asking them 20 shillings for every point of failure by a fellow of craft and 10 shillings for every point of failure by an entered apprentice. Now, if there's more than 1 point, then that amount of money would soon add up, and being good Scots, they would rather learn, they would rather memorize what William Shaw's asking them to memorize rather than actually pay out money. So I think William Shaw was being very clever here in making sure that the Scots Masons followed his instructions, basically. And then he goes on, it's a very nice little part at the end. So any money that's collected during the course of this process, it says that any money is to be paid to the box, which is a physical box held by the lodge, typically with 3 locks, 1 key for each lock, and they had a system of box masters. 3 different individuals had a different key, and this is a bit important for what comes later. So there was 3 locks, 3 keys, and 3 members of the lodge who were called box masters, masters of the box, 3 keys, and only when the three were present and consented to open it could they get into the box where the lodge kept all its money and all its valuables. And so what they're saying here is that the money is to be paid into the box. This is the fines that forever, you know, the fines that because they can't remember things. Whatever money is collected is to be paid into the box for the commonwealth or the common good every year for the practice of the as is practiced in the common lodges of the realm. So, in other words, the lodges have some kind of annual use for money that are gathered in, and we obviously think that that would be for widows and orphans, more likely than not. So again, it begins to show this is quite a sophisticated set of instructions, and this is only one. I mean, there's a couple of dozen of these instructions, but this is the one that I think is absolutely central. And the thing about there being a box and keys, I think, is important for us. What will follow. So just to quickly explain what we think, we know what William Shaw was. He is described in spy reports as being a master of the art of memory. That is someone that can teach aspects of Hermeticism, and we know that he was not the only one in the royal court with this ability. He's actually got at least two other people around him in the royal court, and he has the ear of the king. He's a favourite of the king, so he is a very important individual who's steeped in this hermetic ideal, a different ideal from that being taught by the church. And again, the secrecy of the lodge, I think, lent itself to this worldview. So Shaw is the master of the art of memory. He's a royal courtier. He's in the royal court. He's got offices in the palace, in Holyrood Palace, here in Edinburgh. And we know he's described as that. But also in those spy reports, there are two others, Alexander Dixon and William Fowler, are also described as being masters of the art of memory. And so you've got three very important individuals who are in the court of James VI of Scotland, who are almost certainly teaching this way of looking at the world to the king, King James VI. Of course, King James VI later becomes James I of England in 1603. So we know that there's some kind of pretty big esoteric school in existence in Scotland. And what's more, it's at the very highest reaches of society. It's as high as you can possibly go. It's in the King's Court. And so you can begin to see that William Shaw is more than just a civil servant in many ways. He becomes important not because he's an aristocrat. He was never knighted by the king. So he's just an ordinary man in many ways, although fairly high up the social scale, I have to say. But he's a pretty ordinary individual, not a member of the aristocracy, but he's central to the royal court, and he has a very important part to play in the royal court. Sorry, going the wrong way. So now let's talk about the actual rituals themselves. And as I was saying earlier, I'm very interested in what was going on before 1717. And because Scots have always had this idea that education is important, and of course education essentially is things that are in writing so that they can be read. So Greek and Roman texts were important. So everything in Scottish society tended to have a element to it, even if you couldn't read and write yourself. So the written records, and there are literally thousands and thousands of them, the written records are kept mainly in the National Archive here again in Edinburgh. Unfortunately, you know, it's a strange thing. At least something like 60%, maybe 65% of all the documents in the National Archive have not been translated, or sorry, not been catalogued. So we know there's a lot of material there, but we don't know what it is. So we're very fortunate that somebody came across this very first ritual, the Edinburgh Register House manuscript of 1696. It's called Edinburgh Register House because that's the name of the building of the National Archive. So this first Masonic ritual is known as the Edinburgh Register House manuscript. And as I say, this is the earliest known one from 1696. The Hawkfoot fragment, as it's called, is the last part of the ritual, which is actually, it's glued into the inside cover of the Hawkfoot Lodge minute book. But the interesting thing about the Hawkfoot Lodge is that it's an entirely speculative lodge, no stonemasons in it whatsoever, and this is fully 15 or more years before 1717. And then the actual document that I'm going to show you tonight is the early manuscript, which was discovered about 10 years ago, again, here in the National Archive, and it's dated 1705. Now, all these documents, and the Chetwood Crawley comes along another 5 years only, 5 years later. The thing about all these documents is they're all very similar, but the early manuscript I've chosen tonight to show you is because we actually know who owned this particular ritual. Now, let me see if I keep moving it the wrong way, sorry. So that's just to let you see what it actually looks like. One sheet of paper folded into 4 sides and pretty densely scribbled on. Now, the early manuscript is important. It's called early because that's the name of the family that owned it. The early is the name, the family name of the Earls of Findlater. The Earl, and the Earl, a Scottish Earl, is two steps away from the royal family. So you have the King and Queen, then you have Dukes, and then you have Earls. So he's a very senior aristocrat in Scottish society when he had this, dated 1705. We know he owned it because the National Archive were given all the family papers just after the First World War, and this document is part of the family papers. So it was in the family, what they call the chartulary of the early family. So this document is in there, and so we know the family owned it, or at least this one individual owned it. And the date, just to confirm, as you can see right at the very bottom there, and I think it's very nice, very nicely put. Then the Masons will make the sign and acknowledge that you are a true and perfect Mason, 1705. So whoever wrote this actually has taken the time and trouble to date it. It could even have been the Earl of Findlater himself. We don't know for sure, but we do know that the owner of this document was actually master of the lodge of Dundee, which was only something like 20 kilometers from the family castle near Dundee. So he's a very important individual. He's a member of the aristocracy. He owned this ritual, and we know he was master of this lodge, although it's a bit earlier than the document that he was master of, from memory, 1690. But I thought you might like to see this. This is the armorial bearings, or the coat of arms of the Earls of Findlater. You can just see right at the very bottom in that panel, very faintly, Earls of Finlater. So this is his coat of arms from that very time, okay, 1705. Now, interestingly enough, what's prominent on the very top of the coat of arms? Well, it's a plum rule. So here you have a fairly common Masonic tool, working tool, being incorporated into the Earl of Finlater's family coat of arms. This is actually known as the crest. The top part is the crest of the coat of arms. And we're very fortunate, again, in Scotland, because we keep writing things down. When anybody, any aristocrat was given a position by the king, he had to take a coat of arms that reflected his rank in the aristocracy. And so this is the Earl of Finlater's rank. So he's clearly making a statement about his membership of the lodge by incorporating this into his coat of arms. So now that's your introduction to the ritual. Before we go on to discuss the part of it that I want to discuss, it's important for me to explain exactly what this document or these documents are. They form a family of documents that we call the Scottish School. And that's because there are so many of these documents, at least 7, all from around the same time, all before 1717, all bearing marked similarities to each other. The way they are written is different. The handwriting in each one is different. Sometimes the spelling is different. Certainly the grammar is different. The layout is different. And even sometimes the way the elements are set out is different. Sometimes instead of one question, they break it down into 2. But essentially, all these early documents are the same. They're not exactly the same, but they are the same. Now, they call it a ritual, and I think it's probably just a bit lazy to call it that, because it's more than a ritual. It performs at least 2 main functions. One is that the first part, which is what we're going to discuss now, is known as the catechism. And the second part is the ritual proper. The catechism is a series of questions and answers that Masons used to identify people who were not Masons. Okay, so the ritual itself is the actual ceremony of initiation and the ceremony of passing. And there's also another very interesting part that comes after the Fellow of Craft. But I'm not going to discuss those bits today, because it's in an open forum like this, it's not possible. Normally when I give this presentation, we'll go through this in a tiled lodge, where we can be sure that what we hold precious, it remains amongst ourselves. But the catechism doesn't really go into great detail about the so-called secrets. So I feel able to talk about the catechism part of it. But even there, I've had to remove a couple of parts because they do indicate something very important. So we're just going to have to skip over those couple of things. So these documents, as I say, they're a catechism and a ritual. The purpose, I think, of these is because they are owned by individuals, they're handwritten, they're owned by individuals. I think they are a kind of aide-memoire, or a prompt sheet, or something that the master would have in front of him to stay on track as he goes through the ceremony, so he doesn't lose what comes next, so to speak. So so it's a prompt sheet or an aide-memoire. There's also a catechism for trying to catch out cow-uns and eavesdroppers, and there's also the full-blown ritual itself of initiation and obligation, etc. So it has a threefold purpose. this document, but we're only going to concentrate on the catechism part. So again, the catechism in this, whoops, that's a bit, don't know what's happened there. Yeah, okay. You can see I was doing this in a bit of a hurry, can't you? So what I'll do, we'll go through this catechism, and I think what we'll do, and I think David maybe mentioned this already, but as we go through it, if you've got any questions, just remember them or take a note of them, and then we'll discuss them at the end, so that because I'm just a bit slow these days, I don't want to forget where I am in trying to explain this stuff to you. And you have to remember this is in Scots, so I probably have to do a bit of translation. But the main thing for me is trying to understand what the esoteric element is, because there definitely is an esoteric element, certainly in the second half. Most of the catechisms are formed by 15 questions. The questions are all identical except for one of the rituals or one of the catechisms where one of the questions is divided into two, making 16 questions. There are some questions also related to the Fellow of Craft, and I've omitted them. I don't think we can discuss them here. So these are, as seen, they're obviously handwritten, as I said, but this is what they are. This is exactly how they're written. And so we'll go through them. Question 1, are you a Mason or not? Answer, yes. Well, there's no point in going any further if the answer's no. So it's a bit of sort of Scottish common sense, you know, so there's no need to ask all the rest of the questions if the answer's no. So question 2, and of course this is obviously it's a dialogue between two people, or certainly maybe two or more, but I suspect between two individuals. So having established that this person claims he's a Mason, question 2 is, how shall I know it? The answer is you shall answer, because this is an instruction, you shall answer in a time and place convenient. You shall know it, and then you can see there's a blank. And this is simply a bit of repetition. The aforesaid answer is only to be made when company is present who are not Masons, but there being no company by, you should answer by signs, tokens, and other points of my entry. So that needs a little bit of explanation. The answer is you shall answer in time and place convenient. That answer is only given when you know that there are no Masons present. If you don't know, or you think that there are Masons present, no Masons present, you will answer by signs, tokens, and other points of the entry. So in other words, you will identify yourself in the traditional Masonic manner to the stranger who you're asking these questions of. Question 3, what is the first point? Tell me the first point and I'll tell you the second. And then the explanation for that question and answer I've deleted because it reveals some stuff that exists in the actual obligation. So unfortunately we can't go into that here, but that doesn't mean to say that it isn't interesting. It actually gets more interesting as we go along. So question 4 is, where were you entered? And the answer is in the Honourable Lodge. Now, that seems a bit of a kind of strange question, but it's probably another way to try and catch out someone who is pretending to be a Mason, because only a Mason would actually say, well, the Honourable Lodge. Anyway, so question 5, what makes a true and perfect lodge? And the answer is 7 masters and 5 entered apprentices, a day's journey from a borough's town without bark of dog or crow of cock. So in other words, what is a true and perfect lodge? Well, that's fairly clear. It's a true and perfect lodge is 7 masters and 5 entered apprentices. 12 in total is a true and perfect lodge. But the interesting thing here is that true and perfect lodge has to take place, has to be held a day's journey from a town where you cannot hear a dog bark or a cock crow. So in other words, they're suggesting, but I think this is apocryphal. What they're suggesting is that this meeting is to be so secret. There is no human habitation anywhere close by. Human habitation in those days, of course, was nearly always identified by dogs barking and cocks crowing. If you could hear neither animal, then you're probably quite a long way away from human habitation. But I think what they're saying is, look, just be very careful about where you hold your meetings. In other words, make sure that there are no eavesdroppers around. Now, the question is, next question 6 is, does no less make a true and perfect lodge? Well, the question being asked here is, well, you've told us 7 masters and 5 entered apprentices. What happens if we haven't got that number? Can we not have a true and perfect lodge with less than that? And the answer is given here, well, yes, you can make a true and perfect lodge, but the absolute minimum is 5 masters and 3 entered apprentices. So it's better to have 12, 7 masters and 5 entered apprentices, but if you have to, you can get away with 5 masters and 3 entered apprentices, 8 in total instead of 12. So again, a little bit of latitude when you're holding a lodge for initiation, of course. 5 masters and 3 entered apprentices are probably the minimum number of people that could perform the ceremony. 12 would be better. So again, the number 12 suggests that whatever they're doing is fairly elaborate. 12 people all taking a share in the ritual, and then at a very minimum, 8 people needed to actually make the ritual in a true and perfect lodge. So there is obviously something going on here, much more than just simply saying, well, here's a word, here's a handshake. What they're saying is we need quite a number of people in order to perform the ceremonies. So anyway, the thing that identifies all these documents as being Scottish is certainly question 7. What is the name of your lodge? The answer is the Lodge of Kilwinning, which we all know is an ancient and venerable lodge, and could quite easily, and I'm not going to get involved in a debate tonight about this, but it certainly could be the oldest lodge in the world. My problem here in Scotland, of course, is that I've got 2 different lodges who both claim to be the oldest in the world, and I want to make sure I keep all my friends here in Scotland. So I'm not going to get involved in a fight over that here, at least. But for a ritual, and it's the same for all these old rituals, the question 7 is the same. In every single one of these documents, what is the name of your lodge? Answer, the Lodge of Kilwinning. Now, before 1717, in any form of organised Grand Lodge type activity was taking place, there must be common knowledge amongst all the lodges in Scotland to come up with a similar ritual that they're all using, because these documents come from different parts of Scotland, but it's common across Scotland. So, and the Lodge of Kilwinning proves it. The other thing that makes it, to make it very clear that these are Scottish documents, is the language that is used. These are all written in what we would call Middle to Late Scots. That is a form of English that only existed in Scotland, and we know, for as well as naming Kilwinning, the fact that they're using Middle and Late Scots to write these things means that it's obviously Scottish in origin. So to the second half of the catechism, where I think we get into some very interesting territory. Question 8, how stands your lodge? The answer given is east and west as the Temple of Solomon. I think that's a small copyist mistake. East and west as the Temple of Jerusalem. So right away, an introduction, before 1717, central to the ritual is King Solomon's temple, the Temple of Jerusalem. And just to reinforce that, central position of King Solomon's temple, question 9 comes along. Where was the first lodge? And this makes it very clear. There's no shilly-shallying about like the Temple of Jerusalem. The answer is in the porch of Solomon's temple. Okay, so, and this is the only question that asks for the same answer twice. So King Solomon's temple is so important that there's 2 questions relating to the temple in this catechism. The Temple of Jerusalem, in other words, the Temple of Solomon, and then another question in the porch of Solomon's temple. Now, question 9 is extremely important from the history of Freemasons' point of view. And that's because you'll notice that the first lodge is held in the porch of Solomon's temple. It's not held in the temple. It's in the porch. That is the entryway. That is the part that would be outside the doors of entry to the temple proper. So some people would argue that if you read Kings and Chronicles, some people would argue that the porch, and I think this is absolutely correct, the porch is that place between the 2 pillars that were either side of the entrance, the main doors into Solomon's temple. Now, we've become, and I think this, again, I'm sorry if I'm going to elaborate on this because I think this is an incredibly crucial point. We have a lot of detractors in the world, that, especially in religious circles, that talk about us being anti-Christian or whatever, and they take pot shots at us from a religious point of view. Here, I think we have a very clear statement that the ceremonies of the Masons of the time, and therefore today, is nothing to do with religion whatsoever. If there was going to be a religious connection in our early ceremonies, they would use the temple in a religious sense. What they're saying here, the writers of these rituals, what they're saying here is, no, we're not doing anything in that sacred space. We're not doing something in the temple. What we're doing is outside the temple. And of course, because the people who are using these rituals and who have been using them since at least the very first minute books from 1599 are stonemasons, they are using King Solomon's temple because this is the first stone building in the world. And therefore, the stonemasons are reading their Bible and they're saying the Old Testament of the Bible, and they're saying, we built that. We built that. We built King Solomon's temple, the first stone building in the world, as far as they knew, of course, because the Bible was the only thing that gave them their history, their morals, etc. So they're reading the Bible, and the first stone building is King Solomon's temple. So quite rightly, these stonemasons would have felt incredibly proud of the fact that the first building of stone in the Bible was built by people of their trade, of their occupation. But I think to make it very clear that they are not using the King Solomon's temple for a religious purpose, they are using it for a ceremonial purpose. Based on the fact that stonemasons built King Solomon's temple, they're saying, and the lodge met in the porch, in the entrance, okay? And unfortunately nowadays, of course, we don't say, are you going to the temple tonight? Are you going to meet in the porch of the temple tonight? Instead, we just say, are you going to the temple tonight? And we've become lazy, but that phrase to me is absolutely crucial in identifying what the stonemason forebears of the craft were saying was, we're using King Solomon's temple because it's the first stone building in the Bible and no other purpose. And before somebody says, oh, what about the Tower of Babel? Of course, The Tower of Babel appears before King Solomon's temple does. But if you read Genesis carefully, you'll find that the Tower of Babel is built from brick, not stone. And so the Scottish stonemasons would have nothing to do with this poor quality building material known as brick. And they would have nothing to do with the Tower of Babel, because certainly that was an affront to God anyway. So King Solomon's temple is the first stone building in the Bible, and therefore at that time, as far as the stonemasons of Scotland knew, it was the first stone building in the world. And that made them incredibly proud. Sorry, I've rambled a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure that you got the point I was trying to make. Question 10, are there any light, and it should be lights, in your lodge? And the answer given is 3, the northeast, the southwest, and an eastern passage. Okay, now that part is very important, because although we have lights in our lodge now, in those days, the lights were not physical lights like candles. They were actual parts of a building, and they were denoted by actual individuals. The master mason, the other, the warden, and the third, the fellow of craft. So here you have 3 lights. And as we've said before, you'll get a little bit of a clue from that answer. One denotes the master mason, the other the warden, and the third the fellow of craft. No mention of an entered apprentice. The master mason and fellow of craft. There's a slight implication there that there's 3 degrees here. Anyway, but I can't really go, and I can't say any more than that. Anyway, now, I'm just trying, are there any, thanks. I'm trying to remember, are there any something in your lodge? And we know what the missing word is from the other rituals, because it's written in the other rituals, but I'm sorry, I can't, for the life of me, I can't remember what it is. So somebody can note that down, and I'll find out for you before we go away tonight. Are there any something in your lodge? And the answer, and this again substantiates the fact that we're looking at stonemasons rituals here, albeit stonemasons rituals used by non-stonemasons, like the Earl of Findlater. Here's the answer. Are there any, and it could be tools in your lodge maybe, are there any something in your lodge? Answer, the perpendicular, a square pavement, and a brobed ornal. Now obviously that takes a little bit of translation for you. The perpendicular means...
Brother Abbe says it's, the missing word is symbol. Symbols.
Are there any symbols in your lodge? Okay, right, fine, that's good, thank you. But I will check, just to be sure. Are there any symbols in your lodge? The perpendicular, a square pavement, and a brobed ornal. Well, a perpendicular, 2 words. Perpend in Scots means perpendicular. Eshlar is ashlar. So a perpendicular stone, a square pavement, black and white, square pavement. Pavement is a walking area, a carpet area, a square pavement, and something called a brobed ornal. And this is, we're now pretty sure, is a corruption of a thing, a working tool of the stonemason called a broached thurnal, which is a kind of small axe that was used to take away the worst excesses on a piece of stone before it was given its smoother polish. These 3 symbols show us quite clearly that this is a stonemason's ritual, because of the, if nothing else, the reference to a working tool. But, and this is where I think we now enter the kind of esoteric parts of the ritual. A perpendicular stone, a square pavement, and a broached ornal. I think we find the answer, which is essentially 12. Where will I find the key of your lodge? And the answer is 3.5 feet from the lodge door, under a perpendicular stone and a green divot. Well, that I don't think I think we can say quite confidently what this is. A perpendicular, actually, a perpendicular is a gravestone, and a green divot is grass. So the key of the lodge will be found 3.5 feet from the lodge door, under a gravestone and under grass. Okay? So whoever's asking the question wants a further answer. What mean you by a perpendicular and a green divot? What do you mean by a gravestone and some grass? I mean not only under a perpendicular and a green divot, but under the lap of my liver, where all the secrets of my heart lie. And I just realised that was something else I should have deleted, but too bad. Anyway, and I can perhaps explain why in a minute. So, question 12, where will I find the key of your lodge? Well, let's think about what a key is. A key is something that you need. It's essential to open a lock to get to something that you would otherwise not be able to reach. So in other words, a key is essential to find something that's secret, something that's beyond your reach. The key is something that gives you access to something that's secret. And what they're saying is, where will I find the key that will give me the secrets of your lodge? And the answer is, well, you won't, because I'm going to take the secrets to the grave with me. That's what question 12 means. You will not get the secrets of the lodge from me, because I will take them to my grave. And then there's this other question. Well, okay, right. What do you mean by a perpendicular echelon and grass? Not only are the secrets taken by me to my grave, but I shall keep them under the lap of my liver, where all the secrets of my heart lie. This is a direct reference to a piece of Hermeticism, which believed that from Galen's time, ancient Greek physician, from ancient times where during the Renaissance and Hermeticism in particular, they thought the organs of the body had certain physical attributes, as well as philosophical or spiritual attributes. And for a Hermeticist, the lap of the liver was where you kept your secrets. So not only did you take the secrets to the grave with you, but you kept another Mason's secrets, and the other Mason's secrets were the secrets of the lodge, and any of his personal ones, of course, would be kept in the lap of your liver. And then question 14, and indeed 15, we're back to this thing about the key again. Which is the key of your lodge? A wheel-hung tongue. Now, you can't get more Scottish than that. It's still a phrase we hear today in Scotland. A wheel-hung tongue means somebody that can keep their mouth shut. So in other words, the key of your lodge is lies in the fact that I will not give you any key or any information to it. I am going to keep my mouth shut. And then question 15 again mentions the key. Where lies the key? Answer, in the bone box. Well, we've seen from question 11 and 12, and indeed 13, that we're talking about taking the secrets of the grave to the grave with you. So what's a bone box, or a box of bones? Well, that kind of immediately conjures up images of a coffin. You're buried in a coffin, you go to your grave in a coffin. No such thing as cremation in these days, of course. And then, interestingly, but where lies the key? Not what is the key, but where is it? You know, where is it? So as well as it being in the grave, you've already got that answer. We know it's in the grave. You told it in the grave. He's asking, where else is it? Where is it? And the answer is in the bone box. And I think we've got this beautiful play on words by these stonemasons, these Scottish stonemasons, where they're saying, well, I've already told you about the grave, so clearly that's where the secrets are, in my grave. But what part of the human body, and the clue is in question 14, where in the body is your tongue that probably resembles a box? Well, it's the skull, of course. So the key is in my mind, it's in my brain, where I remember everything that William Shaw told me to remember, the art of memory again. So for me, although these are questions that are being put to people who may be pretending to be Freemasons, I think this is also a very important educational tool for the new member, and of course not only for the new member but for all the people in the lodge that are sitting listening to this. And remember, there's either at least 8 or 12, so they're all listening to this, and this is back to the repetition again, the repetition of ritual. And these questions and answers are probably given at the start of every single meeting. And certainly in Scotland, we have something very similar to that today, where the similar questions, more modern questions admittedly, are asked in a tiled lodge before the candidate can progress. And so I think what we have here is confirmation that even in our much disguised ritual today, we are very definitely incorporating the stonemasons' rituals from before 1717 into modern Masonic ritual. So that's the end of that kind of catechism part, and that is the end of the, oh gosh, I forgot to put a thank you thing up. My apologies. As you can see, it was all a little bit hurried today. So here we have, I think we now have a very clear idea, in my opinion, of what was happening here in Scotland in the late 16th and throughout the 17th century. You have William Shaw, the King's Master of Works, who's instructing all the lodges, all the stonemasons' lodges in Scotland. And of course, throughout that century, these stonemasons' lodges are not restricted to just stonemasons. We have, as we've seen, earls, doctors, lawyers, all sorts of professional people joining these lodges. And they're essentially following William Shaw's instructions from the late 16th century that they are to memorize something. And this is exactly what it is that they're memorizing. Because until we get to these rituals, there is nothing in writing. And so the people who are performing these ceremonies have memorized not only the catechism, but also the ceremony of initiation, passing, and possibly something else. So this art of memory is the technique that William Shaw is using to get the Scottish stonemasons to memorize all the aspects of their ritual because they couldn't read and write. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening. I hope you found that interesting. And hopefully there'll be some questions so that I don't...
I'm pretty sure there are going to be a lot of questions. Just I got several participants messaging in the private that the missing word in question 11 is jewels, ornaments. Are there any jewels, not the symbols?
Jewels. That's exactly right.
Thank you to each of them for reminding us. I just wouldn't want to interrupt the lecture. So there we are. We have the right answer. So people are trying to enter, leave the room. Right now, if the presentation is over, I can, or you can switch it off so we can return to the normal screen where we can see the hands raised and questions could start. So first of all, participants, yes, some, let me help you if you want. Can I interrupt?
Yeah. Stop sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Oh, okay, okay. So once again, thank you so much. Please, everyone, as there are a lot of participants, please do go to the right side of of your screen where the participants panel is, and there is this button which has raised your hand. And by doing that, it'll be easier for me to moderate and give floor to everyone, because I'm pretty sure I got some questions in private. Can you ask that? Can you ask that? So this format allows us to give all the questions. So please don't hesitate asking it yourself. So first of all, just to remind everyone that the author's book, Freemasons, Cracking the Freemasons Code, got the whole chapter about the early ritual, so you can just go and check it by yourself. But it's so much pleasure and much more informative when you listen to the author, which delivers a lot of nuances which may have not got to the publication. So yes, hermano Carlos, floor is yours. Stefanisi, Argentina, as I remember.
Okay.
Oh, let me allow everyone to unmute themselves, which is easier to. So, Carlos, can you unmute yourself? And floor is yours, please. Your question.
Thank you, David. First of all, thank you for your kindly invitation, and also I want to thank Brother Bob. Greeting from Argentina. Dear Rob, I have one question about early ritual. Taking account in your paper, The Revenge of the Operatives, I'd like to know if you know when start in Scotland the Mark degree, and when start to be part of the craft in Scotland. That's all.
Brother
Yeah,
Bob?
the mark. Yeah, sure. The mark degree appears quite a bit later than the period we're talking about. The mark degree appears in Scotland round about 1770, 1780-ish. And there's a number of reasons why we either didn't know about it before, or it was certainly never written about. And I think the main reason was because the mark degree was an operative degree, or certainly it has an operative content, whereas most of the other degrees by that time, 1770 or so, most of the other degrees had become fairly speculative in the content. We certainly were no longer using the rituals we've just been discussing. So they had been replaced by a lot of additions, a lot of elaborations, and the mark degree was probably what the operatives had kept back for themselves. And it was only when they were forced into joining the Grand Lodge of Scotland that either the operative Masons revealed the existence of the mark degree, or perhaps, we're not sure, perhaps they invented it at that time. But this all comes down to the content of the degrees, which of course we can't really discuss here. But yeah, I mean, the simple answer to your question is it was around about 1770-ish, 1770, 1780.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Carlos. Ahmet Emre Demirci, floor is yours, please.
Hello.
Unmute yourself.
Hello,
Yep.
David. Hello, Bob. It's great to be
Hi.
here. Thank you for this great presentation. This is Emre Demirci from the Lodge Dorian, laboring under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Turkey. I do have a quick question about William Shaw. Can we say that the changes Shaw made paved the way for speculative masonry? Because, for instance, he established permanent lodges in particular cities, excluded these lodges from the administration of boroughs, and encouraged them to summon regularly to discuss philosophical matters, and it attracted and grabbed attention from intellectuals like Sir Moray. So can we say that the changes Shaw made paved the way for speculative masonry?
Yeah, I mean, I call William Shaw the father of modern Freemasonry. which kind of can annoy some people, I know. But I think he did exactly that. Something must have been going on before William Shaw came along. History is evolutionary. It's it doesn't happen, very rarely does a big bang happen and something's invented. Aitchison's Haven Minute that I showed you begins on the 9th of January 1599. Something must have gone on before that. I think what William Shaw did was he brought some order to the very casual way that the lodges in Scotland were behaving. And remember, he was a civil servant. He's looking for order, efficiency, and getting things done in a proper manner. And I could just imagine this guy saying, what are these people doing? You know, they're running around all over the place, you know, no written records, they're initiating people here, there, and everywhere. We don't know who they are. We don't know when they became fellows of craft. Yeah, I'm going to put a stop to that. And that's why he says, you know, you're going to start to keep written records. You're going to test them in their ability to remember the ritual. You're going to do this, this, and this. They probably weren't doing any of that before Shaw came along. But that's exactly right. I think you're exactly right. By the mere fact that he formalizes and makes permanent lodges in a specific place, certainly in a specific town, meeting certainly at least once a year on the 27th of December. And that begins to make the whole thing permanent, and it becomes more and more permanent as time goes on. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I would, before I give the floor to the next participant, Brother Bob, I guess your mic might be making some strange sounds a little bit. Just check it that it hasn't jumped to another one. No? We don't hear you. Unmute yourself.
Right. Is that okay? Is that better?
No. That's the wrong mic you're using now.
Is that better?
No.
No? Okay. Right, wait a minute.
It just jumped. It's something you just clicked.
Right, wait a minute.
Yeah, before.
How about that? That's better.
No.
No?
I guess
Okay.
everyone is the same, right? You hear these sounds, right? Which.
You hear me now?
No, not better. It was good a second ago.
Is that better?
No.
Better now? No?
No.
Okay, right. How about that? Is that better? Better now?
No.
No?
I don't know why, but.
I haven't done anything.
Anyway, let's try that way. If we can understand, just to remind the participants, the meeting is being recorded, is being streamlined on YouTube. So there is no necessity, unless you are okay with that, to present yourself with all details of your belonging. I mean, you just can say name, even don't say any name, just to make sure that there are people who came later, who left, who came again. It's permanent moving, so I cannot follow up each of you. Just reminding you that this is being recorded, so you don't need to present yourself unless you just want to do it. Brother Bob, your voice still is strange.
Yeah, is that better? No.
It's the ritual.
I guess
Maybe Bob should sign in again. Sign out and sign in.
Yeah.
maybe that could help, huh?
Is it any better?
No, now it's better. Now it's better. Now it's good. Yes. So, I don't know. Maybe you need to have a glass of beer with you. Clear the throat.
I think somebody's punishing me for talking about the ritual.
Okay,
Whiskey.
brother
Whiskey.
Abraham Metz, floor is yours. Please unmute yourself. You can do that, and your question in, please.
I'm going to make a motion. We take up collection and purchase Brother Bob a new computer.
Very good.
Very good idea, I think. It's
thank you.
worth doing that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Brother Bob, just to clarify for everyone, these early rituals that we were just going over, these pertain to stonemasons or Freemasons?
Used by both. Used by both, because I mean that's why I chose the early manuscript in particular, because that was in the possession of the Earl of Findlater, and we know he was a master of the lodge in Dundee, and that was an operative lodge. So here you have a senior member of the aristocracy being master of a stonemason's lodge. So yeah, so what I think almost certainly happened here, and this is completely different from the situation in England. You've got a system of stonemasons lodges all over Scotland, into which people are initiated who are not stonemasons. So they can't change something that they are joining. You know, it's already set up. Whereas I think in other parts of the world, when Grand Lodges were created, they decided who could join. And so they created a different system, a Grand Lodge system of lodges. And that's why you only see this what we call the transition theory taking place in Scotland. Initially stonemasons lodges, nobody but stonemasons around, then mixed lodges, and then later just entirely speculative lodges. So
what was the earliest lodge in England proper? Was it a stonemasons or a Freemasons lodge?
We don't know, because there are no minute books, no records of the lodge. The Masonic historians always mention Elias Ashmole as being the first speculative Freemason, who in his diary says he joined a Mason's lodge in Warrington, Cheshire, and I think, I can't remember, it was a military man's house that the lodge was held in, and he's claimed to be the first speculative Mason, but clearly it was not a lodge of the Scottish type. And I also have we can say no more than that, because there is nothing other than that one line entry in the diary of Elias Ashmole, and then of course he never makes mention of it for another 60 odd years. So it obviously wasn't all that important to him. What I'm getting at is the system of stonemasons lodges, a network of stonemasons lodges, existed here in Scotland. Nothing comparable existed anywhere else until much later.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brother Abraham. Could you mute yourself? Thank you. I got a question which came in private. I'll read it for you, Brother Bob. It is from Frater Irar. What was the name of the esoteric school that William Shaw belonged to?
It's never been named, and I think that's something we might want to think about, actually. But at the moment, I think all we could say is that it's some kind of Scottish Hermetic tradition that we're dealing with here, because we do know that outside of the royal court, there was a lot of interest in Hermeticism and esoteric studies, particularly in aristocratic circles. So nobody's actually investigated that, as far as I know. Unfortunately, the academic world takes a very dim view of a subject that they can't see and touch. This is because academic historians use or try to use the scientific method of hypothesis testing, theory testing, fact, whereas esoteric or hermetic or whatever are much less tangible things. I mean, for example, the belief or the expression that the Hermeticists were, the alchemists in Hermeticism were trying to change lead into gold. And of course, we know that that's a physical impossibility. And so scientists poo-poo people who believe that, you know, but they forget that this is allegorical. It's not about changing actual lead into actual gold. It's about changing people who are not necessarily the best people in the world and making them into the gold standard of people in the world. So it's an allegory, an allegory for trying to make people better. But the scientist, the academic historian has a bit of a difficulty kind of dealing with that. Certainly in our terms, we've got a problem. Sorry, again, we kind of...
Thanks so much for the question. Norman Strong, floor is yours, please.
Okay, so thank you very much, David, and Bob, thank you for so much interesting content and input. This kind of presentation really does put Freemasonry being universal into some real context. So thank you for bringing this, you know, about. I'm a London Freemason. Love it very much, and I joined when I was 27. I've got 43 years in. When we enjoy the history of our Freemasonry, we of course tend to examine our own jurisdiction. So the United Grand Lodge of England and its formation is something I know pretty well, that I've learnt over the years. The Scottish aspect I've never encountered before, and you're bringing it to us, you know, in really a great way. Abraham asked a question about gentlemen's lodges, speculative lodges versus operative lodges, and in fact, the formation of the Premier Grand Lodge in 1717 was involved with 3 operative lodges and 1 speculative lodge. So this was a sort of a blend of the gentlemen, but this is a preamble. I'm sorry for going on so much. I did have some specific questions about Shaw and his stipulations about the need to memorize and learn, which is important today. It's something we hold value, but I think it's not practiced that well in my experience. Shaw went as far as imposing fines, which you mentioned were 20 shillings or £1 in 1605 or 1650. I'm not sure used, but that was a phenomenal amount of money in the day, and I think few people could ever afford to pay those fines. You also mentioned that they needed to learn their rituals because they didn't necessarily have the ability to read or write. Well, I would suggest that people who had the ability to pay fines of that magnitude, you know, had to be well-heeled people with money wherewithal properly rank in society. So I don't know, maybe you could just elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah.
So have I held the floor for too long?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's all
interesting questions.
We're very generous lecturer, and we have 2 hours altogether, so we are pretty well. We still have like 35 minutes to go, so no problem at all. Thank you for very interesting insight. Please.
Okay, all very good questions. I should have perhaps mentioned because Scotland was a separate country at that time. The currency was different. So although we referred to shillings, a Scottish shilling was valued at 1/10 of an English shilling. So it was 10% of the value of an English shilling. But I think it was the cumulative effect as well, because what William Shaw is saying, for every point of failure, for everything that you forget, it's 10 shillings, another 10 shillings, another 10 shillings. And you can just see these Scots Masons going, oh my goodness, that's a week's wage gone just like that. So he's making sure that they remember, because he knows that they're not going to want to pay sort of accumulated fines, you know. So he's actually very clever. And there was another part to your question, I think, wasn't there? Can't remember. Or is it just about the value?
Norman, could you repeat it, please?
Yes, yes, I was certainly sort of looking at the affordability aspect, you know, of fines, and you know, you've explained that very well. You know, that answer to me. I think no, I was probably being rhetorical, rather giving responding to Abraham Metz's point about the distinction between speculative lodges and operative lodges, and how they actually figured in the creation of what is regarded as the first Grand Lodge of its time. That was...
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole history is fascinating. I mean, ultimately, it really doesn't matter who was first, as long as we're all behaving and acting like Freemasons. That's the main thing. What I'm more interested in is trying to understand the esoteric content and what motivated people to use their daily working practices in a speculative way, because we do know that as stonemasons they were building a church during the day. Well, when they went to lodge in the evening, they didn't build anything as such. They didn't build anything physical. So it must have been a mental exercise that they were engaged in, and it's trying to work out what that mental exercise was. And that's why I think going back to the original rituals gives us some kind of a clue as to what they were doing, what they were thinking, and we can clearly see they're applying stonemasons' working tools to the actual ceremony of, yes, to the actual ceremony, but we can't go into that in any great detail, unfortunately. So there's a clear development from daily working life to speculative lodge in the evenings, and then we're blessed by these written records of being able to literally see how people who were not stonemasons are admitted to these lodges over a period of 100 years, all across Scotland, to the very point that we get to, at the end of that period, we get to looking at these operative lodges, and there's not a single operative mason in them at all. It's been taken over by the likes of you and me. So this is this kind of evolutionary process that I'm interested in. Obviously, something motivated the stonemasons to develop these ceremonies and practice these rituals. But what attracted the people who weren't stonemasons is also equally interesting. So in some ways, these rituals cause more questions to be asked than we can actually answer. But that's part of the enjoyment of the whole thing, I think, anyway.
Thank you. I got Brother Abe. You have a follow-up question regarding? You need any clarification here? You're here. Unmute yourself and ask if it's regarding this question.
No, I just wanted to clarify what I was intending to do was to just try to get historical reference, because I'm aware of the founding of the premier Grand Lodge of England, 1717. What I wanted to know was, prior to that, there had to be, or there should have been some. So the formation of the premier Grand Lodge in England was 2 operative lodges and 1 speculative lodge came together and formed the Premier Lodge in 1717. But prior to that, were there any other operative lodges in England? In other words, was there stonemasonry in England, or is there really just no evidence of that? We just know that somewhere along the way there had to have been, because there were two operative and one speculative lodge that formed the Premier Lodge.
Yeah. Yes, I'm on mute. What I do as a historian is I'm looking for evidence. So when I look at what exists in Scotland, in order to be able to compare that with what's happening anywhere else, I would have hoped for similar written records in England that would, be contemporary with the situation in Scotland. There are none. I mean, even the four lodges that came together in London, the three describe themselves as operative, but we don't really know anything other than that statement. Certainly, I think they talk about the oldest master being present, taking the chair, that kind of thing. But there's no way of knowing if those lodges in London were anything like the lodges in Scotland, because there is just not the material to compare with. So we're left guessing. Certainly, there is nothing in England that's got the length of time in terms of the written record. So you have in Scotland, you've got more than 100 years of written evidence, whereas in England, you have, I think you've got something like 1 or 2 years before 1717, and that's about it, which is a shame. Not saying that there wasn't something the same, but we just don't know. That's unfortunate, the case. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to be more efficient, because we got a lot of questions in chat and hands raised. I'll use one. I'll give floor one from the participants raising hands, and I'll read the one from the chat. So Carlos Vera, my colleague from Ecuador, QCC. Please, floor is yours. Unmute yourself and ask the question. You're here, Carlos?
Yes.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. Carlos Vera, Local Secretary of QCCC, Ecuador. Thank you for the invitation and for the great conference. I agree in general that early rituals is not the same as early Masonry, but I would like to ask to Brother Bob to make a short explanation about how he established the difference between both concepts, please. Thank you.
Between the difference between operative and
speculative ones.
Yeah, that's based on the actual membership of the lodges. So again, we're very fortunate that as well as the records of the lodge, we have the records of the incorporations. Incorporations were very much like guilds, English guilds, but unlike England, it was during the Reformation, the incorporations or guilds in Scotland were allowed to continue. And in fact, they continued well into the 19th century. And some of them still exist as charitable institutions. But so we've got the lodge records, the membership records of the lodges, and the membership records of the incorporation. So you had to be a stonemason to join the incorporation, and you couldn't work as a stonemason without being a member of the incorporation. So we've got a list of stonemasons and a list of members of the lodge, and then you can compare the two, and it's very obvious that these early lodges were entirely made up of stonemasons. Again, because of the written records, particularly the very early ones, we can be very precise as to the date the first non-stonemasons joined the stonemasons lodges, and that was in 1634, when small groups of aristocrats were admitted to the Lodge of Edinburgh. And of course, they recorded that fact in their minutes, and they recorded the names. So Sir Anthony Alexander, so a knight of the realm, was initiated in the Lodge of Edinburgh in 1634. So before 1634, nothing but working stonemasons are members of the lodge. From 1634, slowly but surely, non-stonemasons, mainly aristocrats and professional people, join these stonemasons lodges, still controlled by the stonemasons, but increasingly there's a larger and larger element of people who are not working stonemasons joining these lodges. And the best example of that process is the Lodge of Aberdeen, whose records begin in 1670. And that lodge has senior members of the aristocracy, a duke, an earl, professors of mathematics, ministers of religion, all sorts of very important people, and they dominate the lodge. In fact, at the beginning of their records, they probably existed before, but their written records begin in 1670, and in 1670, only 20% of the membership of that lodge are stonemasons. So 80% are not stonemasons. So we can see, as I say, this process of people like us taking over the stonemasons lodges. And we get to the point, and we can see that there's obviously a tension created by that fact. What happens is, it gets to the point where the non-stonemasons want to start changing things, because, well, they're not stonemasons, so they don't understand why only a stonemason can become master of the lodge. And of course, these rules were put into place in order to preserve the practices of the stonemasons and protect the lodge from these kind of heathen non-stonemasons, you know. And what happened was, eventually the speculative masons, if you like, dominate the lodge and start changing things, to the point where in several cases, the operative masons leave the lodge and go away and form another lodge, which is entirely operative, because they don't like what the speculative masons have been doing. And back to Aberdeen, I think we can make a couple of very important points. The Lodge of Aberdeen, the man who writes these first records in 1670, is a man by the name of James Anderson. And James Anderson, of course, is also famous for another reason, in that James Anderson wrote the Constitution and Laws for the Grand Lodge of England, published in 1723. Now, it's not the same James Anderson, it's the son of the James Anderson who wrote the Aberdeen records. And James Anderson, Senior, is a glazier. He's not a stonemason, he's a glazier. He's a member, he's a master of the lodge on 3 occasions, and he's secretary of the lodge on 2 occasions. So James Anderson, the man who writes the constitutions in 1723 for the Grand Lodge of England, grew up in a household where the father is master and secretary of the Lodge of Aberdeen. And so clearly, I think that's what they would call a circumstantial evidence. But James Anderson clearly had knowledge of what was going on in the Lodge of Aberdeen, because he makes mention of that when he's in London. So this process of going from operative to mixed culminates in 1702, when you have a lodge in the Scottish borders called the Hawkfoot Lodge, founded in 1702 entirely by members of the local gentry. There is not a stonemason in sight. So before 1717 in Scotland, we have the situation of entirely operative lodges, mixed lodges, and entirely speculative lodges that exist in Scotland before 1717. And as far as I know, Scotland's the only place in the world where you can actually see this process taking place in writing from 1598 onwards. Sorry, just went on a bit longer than I should.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Luke Watson, please unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Hello, good evening. From my understanding,
Hello.
I may be incorrect, but I feel like a lot of the minutes and documents we found have all been in recent history. Do you feel there's still more to discover? And then do you find it hard to differentiate between some of that's real and authentic and maybe some of that was misstated or is incorrect?
First and foremost, no, I mean, these minutes are really, they're following the instruction of a senior member of the Royal Court. But you can get a sense from them that they were written rather reluctantly. And I say that because of their brevity. You know, they've been told that they've got to keep written records. So they did that, but they did the bare minimum. So, and of course, I think the main purpose of the written records was to make sure that people who were initiated were recorded. And that's, of course, where the term entered apprentice comes from, for example, because prentices, not apprentices, but prentices, as they were called in Scotland, were required to be entered into the Lodge records, and so they became entered apprentices. So I don't think there was any real errors made. They were not writing for posterity. They were writing in order to keep William Shaw happy. And they were also keeping a written record, if you like, of their membership and also of the financial affairs of the Lodge. None of the minutes describe anything at all about the ceremonies. There's occasional hints about the ceremonies, but there is no full detailed explanation of what they were actually doing in the Lodge. So in some ways it's very superficial. They become very powerful and potent as historical evidence because of their continuity, the fact that one secretary will pass away and another one takes over, the names of non-stonemasons are recorded as well as stonemasons. So they're not intending to write for history. They're writing for their own internal purposes. Frankly, I don't think they could care less whether you and I were ever going to read these things. It was what they required, firstly for Shaw, and later just for their own internal use. That makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay, look. Okay, Christian Torres, and then I'll read the question from the chat. Christian.
Right. Gracias, hermano David.
Thank
you, brother. Brother Robert, you did an excellent job as usual. Well, I want to let you know that you know, the group that we have of Scottish Freemasonry here in South America, we are meeting virtually like this chat this upcoming Monday at 7 p.m. here, which is an awful hour for you. It'll be 12 midnight. So if you want to be a part, I encourage you, but I don't force you. I understand if you don't intend. Well, anyhow, I'll make the presentation, and the topic will be, guess what? Origins of Masonry in the UK. So I think it was really important for me to attend this. I saw your presentation, and first time that I see the Antient Lodge in 1599. I have some information from Kilwinning Nothing. I have some information from Mary's Chapel 1. So I think it's a matter of reading and understanding more and finding out more information. And you're the right person to enlighten us and let us know how we deal with this. Or if, well, I guess there is a fight between lodges who wants to be the first, right?
Yeah, I think it's just human nature, isn't it? Yeah. You know, I want to be the oldest. I want to be the first. But ultimately, as long as we're behaving as Freemasons, that's really the main thing.
Okay, so I'll read from the chat. Ethan B asked, did William Shaw ever met Giordano Bruno along with William Fowler?
No, it's as simple as that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, Bruno never got as far as Scotland, and as far as we know, Shaw never travelled to England at the time Fowler was I think in Oxford. So no, short answer, but he must have known about him. There's no doubt about that. Bruno was the ultimate hermeticist. He was the guy that anybody who was interested in that subject would have known about. And of course, the mere fact that the church burnt him at the stake as a heretic would have made sure that everybody knew about him after he was dead. But we do know, actually, I think it was Dixon that he met in England. But I'm not going to swear to that. But Bruno actually describes, and I think it's Dixon, Giordano Bruno describes Dixon as being his disciple. So I can't imagine that Shaw was unaware, because we know that Dixon ended up in the Royal Court and would have met Shaw and Fowler on a daily basis.
Thank you so much. Man, time flies so fast. Daniel, the floor is yours. Please unmute yourself. Daniel.
Hey, brethren, fraternal greetings from Chile. First and foremost, thank you, Brother Robert, for your lecture and your time. I would like to ask you, are you in possession of any information about the Tyrrhenician monks who are supposed to be the founders of the Lodge Mother Kilwilling number 0 in circa 1150?
Yeah. Yeah, Tyrrhenician monks from France. It's a very small order. I'm surprised they even got as far as north as Kilwinning. But and here we have a problem in terms of a Masonic historian. Because someone built a stone building in a particular place in Scotland doesn't mean that there was a lodge there. It certainly means that the stonemasons built something, but whether we will ever know it was a lodge as we understand them, we will never know, because there are no records. It's an assumption that there was a lodge there. And we can make the same assumption about other stone buildings. If a stone building means there was a lodge, then there would have been a lodge at the Egyptian pyramids, there would have been a lodge at Stonehenge, there would have been a lodge at the Aztec temples. So you see the problem you have. An academic historian wants evidence. It's a wonderful idea that there was a lodge in Kilwinning in 11, whatever it is, but then the same would apply to any other any other place in Scotland, particularly things like Melrose, where there was another magnificent abbey and an operative lodge there also. So it's a difficult one, but essentially the academic historian will say, we just don't know.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So greetings to Chile. Thank you, Daniel. Just I would remind participants that as time flies by, I see the comments that you want to share, like Norman did, and instead of reading it here, you can actually leave it here, and later on when you come back to watch this recording again, you can go through the chat. Actually, you can save the chat on your computer. There is no problem. And if any comments or remarks or some clarifications, in addition, some participants want to deliver to others, please put it in the chat, because time-wise it'll take a lot of time to listen to each comment on each subject or opinion shared by Brother Bob. So this is very unique opportunity to put it in the chat, so your voice kind of is heard and later read by any interested person. I would give the floor to Gohan Eligin. Floor is yours. Gohan.
Thank you,
yep.
Brother. Thank you, Brother Bob. It was a beautiful lecture. You talk about 4 early rituals, and there were only 2 degrees on these rituals. but when you talk about catechism, and there are some masters, some number of masters are mentioned for a true and perfect lodge. So the question is, even there is no a third degree, there were several masters in the lodge. It's because of the mastership, isn't it for ad vitam, or is there another explanation for that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, what we can say without saying what, and this is the problem we have with these minutes, because I'm going to say something, but I can't say entirely what I would like to say. But let me put it this way: the actual ritual part describes in full the way an entered apprentice is admitted to the lodge. The fellow of craft part is much more abbreviated, and it basically says the ceremony is pretty much as it was before, except for these changes. Okay, so there's a full first degree, there's a very brief second degree, there is no third degree. So in terms of a logical progression, it's not impossible that they're doing the minimum they can, but they're simply saying nothing at all about the third degree. Now, the reason why I think there probably was a third degree, but we've got to be careful because we don't know for sure, but what I can say is that when you read this ritual, there is a part of the third degree, the present third degree, and a very important part of the present third degree, which is actually part of in the ritual that we've just discussed, is in the ritual part of the fellow craft. So in other words, part of the fellow craft degree from that time is now in our present third degree. Mm-hmm. So that kind of begs the question, is this what they were doing? We'll give you the full first degree and we'll write it all down so you can stand it all. Then we'll give you some information about the second degree, but we're giving you nothing about the third at all. We don't know for sure, but I suspect, and somebody asked the question before, I suspect that there are probably earlier rituals still to be found, simply because the similarities between all these rituals they're so close. It's almost as if there was one central ritual that they were all copying from. We're never going to know again for sure until that document appears, if it ever will. But because of the similarities, it sounds like, and I mean, remember, these documents are scattered all over Scotland. They're not from one central point. So the lodges themselves knew this common ritual. So we're never going to know for sure, but I suspect that there is, the third degree was in existence at the same time as these rituals, but whether it was the same as what we know today is another matter. We just don't know. Sorry, a long answer, I know.
Thank you, Brother Bob. Just kind of yes or no question, which came from Norman Strong. Does Scotland require or by custom choose its grandmaster from royalty or nobility?
Traditionally it has, but that's not always been the case. In fact, our present Grand Master is not an aristocrat. He's a senior police officer, or a retired senior police officer. So it's quite frequent, but not permanent. Let me just take the opportunity, David, to say a lot of the kind of interpretation of that ritual is evolved over time, and some of it is my own ideas. But there is one part of the ritual perhaps I could ask you, all you guys, to think about, see if you can come up with an answer. And this is this measurement of 3.5 feet from the lodge door. Can't remember which question it is, which answer it is. But we don't know what this particular measurement can be. So 3.5 feet, it's something just a bit over a meter, 42 inches in our old style measurement. So if anybody can think of what 3.5 feet would relate to, that would fill in a little gap that we don't understand at the moment. So that's something for you guys to think about.
So here comes a homework for the next lecture, I guess, from the professor. So it is well noted. I will circulate this particular question to everyone who has left the email now or earlier. So Bora on Gürer, floor is yours. And again, I would be fine, and I guess we still have 133 participants still with us. And if we are not limited in time, we have almost spent these 2 hours. If Brother Bob is fine to spend with us like more 15-20 minutes, if nothing's on the schedule and he's not going out for a night walk or something.
Yeah.
Okay, then Bora, floor is yours, please.
Is it Bora or Javad?
It says
I think
Bora
we have-
Yongürer.
Oh, I see. My name is Gürer as well, Javad Gürer. So we'll listen to him first. Then, if you give me the floor, I have a question to ask.
Okay, I haven't seen your hand raised, so.
I have been.
Oh, like physically. Okay.
Yes, physically.
There are 6 or 7 pages, and scrolling
Oh, I
back and
see.
forth wouldn't make any sense because you may raise now hand and I won't see it anyway. So that's why that tool is very efficient, or at least for other participants. Just write the question in private, in public, and I'll try at the end of discussion, just read it through and try not to leave any question out. So thank you. Bora, floor is yours.
Thank you, Brother David. And Brother Bob, thank you again for this great evening. My question is one question, but in 2 parts, actually, because we are talking about 2 different comparisons, previous day's lecture and tonight's. Operative Masons versus Speculative Masons, and Stonemasons versus Freemasons. In that light, I want to ask you about something William Shaw, because we know a little bit about the background of the William Shaw, but we surely know that he was not a stonemason, but still he was the master of work. He was assigned as master of work, and he was the member of the lodge also. And there's another person, the aide of William Shaw is James Boswell. As far as we know, he was a squire in somewhere Ochenlach. I don't know if I'm spelling correct, but he was a squire, and also he was not a stonemason too. But both of them was the member of the lodges. So how are we gonna call them? So, and what do we know about the history of these 2 peoples? Might they be the first speculative masons or Freemasons? That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay. Alexander Boswell of Auchinleck was William Shaw's clerk. He was essentially his gopher. A very American term, I think. But so Alexander Boswell he probably actually wrote out the Shaw statutes. William Shaw wouldn't write them himself, so it would have been Boswell who wrote them for him, and then a copy was sent to every single lodge, which is why we're fortunate we've got so many copies left. So the problem we have in saying that he was a member of a lodge, or they were members of a lodge, is circumstantial, and that comes from this from the fact that the statutes were written on the 28th of December, which would be the day after the annual meeting of the Masons in Scotland. So the 27th of December was their annual general meeting, and it wouldn't make any sense for William Shaw to write his statutes and then find that it was 364 days before the lodge would then read them again, because there was only one regular meeting a year.
Just
So-
intervention, Brother Bob. Sorry, someone, Eduardo, you're sharing the screen. Please tell us that it's to do anything with us. We don't want to
Pardon?
have any legal problems or anything.
Yeah, you need to hit the green button.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
That's it.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry. I've heard bad things weeks ago. So yeah, please.
So yeah, so that's the problem we have. Because William Shaw said on the 28th of December, you will start to keep written records. We don't have any written records for when he probably was initiated in the lodge the day before, because the Masons took him at his word. You will start to keep written records from now going forward, not for in the past. So we don't know if he was a member and if he was, when he was made a member. So that's our main problem there. In terms of the terms used, you're absolutely right. I mean, this, you know, the word speculative Freemason wouldn't have existed at the time of William Shaw, wouldn't have existed until after 1717. So it's really not a very good word to use to describe what was happening in Scotland in the 17th century. And that's why, I mean, I know it's very clumsy, but to make it very clear, you should really be talking about stonemasons or non-stonemasons. But, you know, human beings being human beings, that's not very eloquent, is it? So that's why people will then say operative or speculative, but it doesn't help us understand very much about what was happening in Scotland. So that's why, I mean, I could say operative or non-operative, you could say that, or stonemason or non-stonemason, then at least you know what kind of mason you're talking about. And I think I've mentioned this before, when you read some of these popular books about Freemasonry and all these other subjects, they only ever talk about the Masons, as if the Masons are only one group of people. And so when we talk about Rosslyn Chapel, for example, they talk about the Masons built Rosslyn Chapel. But in a Scottish context, we have to ask the very simple question, in Scotland at least, what kind of Mason are you talking about? What kind of Mason do you say built Rosslyn Chapel? Because if you just simply say the Masons built Rosslyn Chapel, a lot of people out there would think, well, you're talking about the Freemasons. But of course, in Scotland, we're not. You're either a stonemason or a Freemason. But that also means we have another problem of definition. If you're a stonemason building Rosslyn Chapel during the day, what are you when you go to the lodge at night? Well, of course, you're a speculative Freemason because you're not building anything in the lodge. You're performing a ceremony. You're performing an initiation. So it's these definitions that become very confusing to people. So that's why, I mean, and as I say, it's not eloquent, but it makes it very clear as to what kind of Mason you're talking about. And I suppose it comes down to looking at the membership of a lodge as to what kind of lodge it was. But even then, that's inaccurate, because if you say it's an operative lodge, the operative lodge didn't do anything operative. It was just happened to be the members were just stonemasons, but they were speculating about stonemasonry that they actually did during the day. See what I mean? So you see the confusion that there is, and that's simply because it's a bit lackadaisical the way people write about the Masons as if there's only one kind. Sorry, I don't know if I really answered the question or not there, but I'm just kind of highlighting the problem of definitions, if you like. Okay.
Let's take it as the answer. Otherwise, we'll be unfair to other participants who've been waiting. We still have many I think lectures coming, so we'll still have time with Brother Bob to spend. Jorge Enriquez Valle dos Santos, I guess. Floor is yours, please, hermano.
Greetings from Brazil. I'd like to thank Bob for the splendid lecture, and you also for organizing this. My question, I think, is related. Bob, I'd like to know if in your research, in your studies, when in Scotland the third degree was introduced in Freemasonry.
Well, again, you know, looking at written records, and of course that's what a historian will do. Will look at what, you know, what evidence actually exists at the moment. And again, because we are blessed here with lodge minutes, what we find, and I can't be, yeah, I think I can be precise with the date. March 1725 is the first reference of the working of a third degree in any lodge anywhere. And that's a lodge in Scotland called Dumbarton Kilwinning, which still exists. And it's actually their first minute from 1725 that it's a second minute that describes someone who had been made a fellow of craft at the previous meeting being made a master mason at the next meeting. Now that's important in its own right, because clearly you had to be a fellow of craft and therefore an entered apprentice before you could become a master mason. But significantly, when he was made a master mason, the minutes record that there were 7 master masons present to confer the degree on that fellow of craft. So the third degree existed before the first reference in writing to the existence of the third degree, if you follow me. So we know that before 1725, the third degree must have been worked in Scotland somewhere. Unfortunately, we don't know where. So in terms of evidence, 1725 is the first written record of the working of a third degree. But, as I was saying before, the existence of these rituals, the ritual seems to suggest that the elements of the third degree were already in existence as early as 1696. And there still needs to be some research, I think, done on that. But that's some way down the line, you know. But that's, yes, and that's the first written reference. Sorry, probably going on too long again. There we are.
Thank you, Brother Bob. Brother Jevad, floor is yours.
Yes, hello, Brother Bob. Thank you. Great lecture.
Sorry, Brother Shiva, not you. You're in line. Just Brother Jevad. Sorry for interrupting, but let's keep to the order. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting you, Brother Jevad. And let's think about the time and do it efficiently. Thank you.
Mine will be a very short question, but
go ahead.
I won't leave before I thank Brother Bob for his wonderful presentation. My question is, you know, there is a very important Scottish manuscript, namely Trinity College Dublin, 1711, which gives us an idea of existence of 3 degrees masonry in Scotland. Is this true?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The answer is yes. You also it's also known as the Chetwood Crawley manuscript. I think it is. I'm going to have to check on that, to be honest. But yes, I mean, again, it makes it quite clear that there is something more than just a fellow of craft. Yes. Thank you for that.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
More reading for me.
Thank you. Onur Demir, floor is yours. That was really short question and short answer. I mean, I'm fine. I just want to. I just do not want to abuse your time. Onur,
Yes.
please.
Thank you. In question 11, the jewels perpendicular, and in question 12, under a perpendicular. Brother Bob said perpendicular for the first question is, from what I understood, was the perfect ashlar. And for the second question, he mentioned as a gravestone. I don't know if the gravestones are square stones in Scotland. I wanted to ask that. Also, I'm not lucky to share the square pavement with Brother Bob. So how can I get my hands on that early rituals? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's because it's the nature of the Scottish language. Perpend means perpendicular or upright. So and ashlar is ashlar. So it's an upright stone. So in both questions and answers, I think it's referring to a gravestone. So a perpendicular stone is what a perpend ashlar means. It's just the Scottish way of writing that. The ritual itself, I suppose we can work out a way of doing that. We might come back for another session or something, and I'll investigate how we can get copies of that.
Okay, I think yeah, the answer is accepted. Thank you, Onur. Just before I give the floor to Shiva, maybe the presentation, which is already, let's say, recorded, can you send it to my email and I will attach it to the email which I circulate among the participants and not only, so they can have the reference instead of looking at in the video recording. Can we do that, right?
Yeah, you want me to do that?
No, you can send it to me and then I will disseminate it
Oh,
to everyone. Later on, just to ask you.
Yeah, I was just thinking about having to send an email to 200 people. So
I'll take care of that. You just send it to me and I'll do everything else.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, Shiva, floor is yours. Sorry for interruption, early interruption.
No, Brother David, my apologies. I thought you called on me earlier, so my apologies for that interruption earlier. Brother Bob, amazing lecture. Thank you very much. Just a quick question with regards to the memberships to the lodges, and it's almost a follow-up question to what was asked earlier. Now, if the lodges were in essence almost trade associations for actual operative masons, stonemasons, what was the impetus for to admit non-masons to the lodges?
Mm-hmm. Right. The function of the lodge is actually quite different from the guilds. Okay, so that's our first problem, is trying to work out what these lodges were doing. So the incorporation, or the guild, if you like, they're not quite the same. Guilds were English, incorporations are Scottish. The guild was a kind of economic or a proto-trade union type of thing. It was an economic entity. Everybody knew about it. It was part of the political structure of the town or city. So there was no issue there. That was quite normal. Other trades had the same. So bakers, iron workers, shoemakers, they all had their incorporation. The difference is that the stonemasons had this other extra organization called the lodge. No other trade had a lodge or anything like it. And the reason for that was that the lodge was secret. It was not a public organization like the incorporation or guild. So everybody knew about the incorporation or guild, but nobody except the stonemasons who were members knew about the lodge. That means that that raises all sorts of questions that we can't really get into here, but very quickly, William Shaw is writing instructions not to the incorporation or the guild, but he's writing instructions to the lodge, which is secret. So he is participating in a secret organization instead of being involved in the public or political organization. You would think that would be normal. And I don't know if that answers your question, because I've forgotten that one again. You find out if that was, did that answer the question?
No, my question was actually, what was the impetus to allow non-stonemasons to be admitted to lodges?
Right. Okay. We know fairly well what the answer to that is, and that was because the lodge, not the incorporation, the lodge fell on hard times financially, so they needed a way of getting extra money, and this was at a time of economic depression. The building work had virtually ceased in Scotland. There was wars going on at the time, and so there was no income. And in fact, a lot of the stonemasons, of course, weren't working, so there was no need for them to join a lodge, because you only joined a lodge once you were an entered apprentice or a fellow of craft or whatever. So when these non-stonemasons joined, they paid much more than a stonemason would. And that ensured the financial survival of the lodge. And that was the reason. However, I think there's another part to your question is, why would these non-stonemasons want to join in the first place? Why join? Now, the answer probably is that, well, we're never ever going to know for sure what that answer is to that. I suspect it's something as simple as, we've heard about this secret organization, who are the members of whom have got the knowledge to build a cathedral, but they are uneducated. They can't read and write. But here I am, I'm an aristocrat, I can read and write, but I can't build a cathedral. So I want to find out what it is that they know that allows them to be able to do that. So curiosity, I suppose, is the first answer. The second part of that, of course, is the nature of Scottish society, which was a lot more integrated. Economic classes were not as obvious as they are in other countries. And there's a whole reason there's actually physical, geographic reasons for that. But the classes in society were much closer together. So an aristocrat getting together with his social inferiors would not be considered strange. What might have been considered strange was to continue attending meetings after you'd been initiated. A lot of these aristocrats did exactly that. They didn't join, get the secrets, and never come back. They joined and kept coming back to the lodge. So obviously there was something very attractive to them. Exactly what, we'll never know for sure. So we're only taking our best guess. But financial from the point of view of the lodge.
So basically, it's a historical crossroads of financial needs, and a sharing of knowledge is the reason why all of us today, I imagine we're all speculative Masons, is the reason why we all can be Masons today.
Yeah.
Money and know-how, you mean?
Yeah. No, let me put it this way. If the lodges didn't need the money, they would never have admitted these people. They only admitted them because they needed the money. And these people joined because of sheer curiosity. But I'm pretty sure that they were only allowed to join because they brought money with them initially.
Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have the last hand raised. That is Frank. Then, with your permission, I'll try to read the questions, which you may answer with one or maximum two sentences. Again, to try to give them the recorded answer. So, Frank,
Brother Cooper,
floor
your
is yours.
knowledge,
Yep.
the knowledge that you carry in your bone box is phenomenal. Given at the time the influence of the church and the guys were building cathedrals, the Masons, didn't the introduction of Hermetic thinking start causing a bit of conflict? Did they have the same kind of rules we have today? No religion and politics to be discussed?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important question, you know, and it raises all sorts of issues. You know, given the fact that the church burnt Hermeticists at the stake as heretics, you're right. I mean, why would they tolerate that sort of thing going on in a lodge? Well, the short answer is because they didn't know about it. The lodge was secret, and so the church they didn't get to know, and that's why the lodges were able to get away with it. Basically, they kept it secret. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, with your permission, I'll just go quickly through the questions. Just to wrap, then we will wrap up the meeting, and I guess that's it. Meanwhile, if anybody wants to say the final, kind of ask the final question, please prepare. I guess Brother Norman Strong asked for the 3 feet east, 3 west, 5 or more feet perpendicular. I guess when the presentation will be shared with you, I guess that that will be in the presentation, so we don't have to spend time on it unless you wanted to ask something else.
Yeah, no, the point I made there was just a very, very quick possibility of the question that Robert put to us about 3'6". Maybe there's a connection. We all know what's 3 foot east, west, 5 feet perpendicular. That has the same sort of more kind of suggestions in your catechisms. That was the point I put.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Need to give some thought-provoking stuff, isn't it?
Okay, thank you. So we still have homework to do, and we'll come back with that question on the next lecture. So Renzo left the question, Renzo T. I don't know whether he's here, but let's have his question read. Brother Bob, Bedford, the 1717 codification of Freemasonry by Anderson. May we find in previous catechism Christian elements before? I don't know what before means, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the ritual that we've discussed tonight, or the part of the ritual we didn't discuss tonight, is very definitely Christian. The obligation is very Christian, and the reason for that is simply this: there was nothing else around. Scotland was a Protestant country, and there may have been one or two individuals who were members of other faiths, but there was nothing else organized in terms of religion. So that's why that Christian element is in the ritual, for that very simple reason.
Thank you. Gerard O'Donnell, if you're here, I guess he couldn't find the raise hand button, and if you still are here, floor is yours. Gerard O'Donnell, maybe? I guess he's not here, so I just, okay, I'll just skip it, maybe later on. Meanwhile, Abraham, maybe you ask the question and I'll sort the next question for Bob. You have
Thank you,
raised
David. It wasn't so much a question; it was more of a comment, just to add on. I was having a sidebar conversation with one of my fellow brothers here, with Dave Felty, and I thought it was important enough to bring it up to the rest of the brothers present, and that is, it serves kind of as a historical reminder that that we should be very careful not to admit men simply because the lodge needs funds.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. They didn't guard the West Gate very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
And we see many Grand Lodges throughout the world in like circumstances that they were back then, where they're seemingly beginning to lower standards, or perhaps open up a bit more to questionable individuals, and we have a duty as Masons to guard the West Gate.
Yep.
Okay, here is kind of a long question from Wayne. It was mentioned the link between operative Masons and the guilds. Is that the only link between the two, that operative Masons would have to have been members? It has been mentioned that Freemasonry could have come from guilds. Does it sound? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't think that was possible, and the reason is very simple. You've got to remember that all these trades, like bakers or shoemakers or sword makers, they all had their own guild, but they also had their own secrets that they transmitted inside the guild. Okay, so when you joined the guild, you were initiated, and you got the secrets of a baker or a shoemaker. They couldn't do that in the stonemasons guild, because that guild contained other trades, like coopers, barrel makers. It included wrights, that is carpenters, and other people who were connected with the construction industry who were not stonemasons. So of all the trades, the stonemasons were the only ones that had people who were not just stonemasons in the guild. So what they did was they created this other entity called a lodge, where only stonemasons could join, and it was in the lodge that they transmitted the secrets of the stonemasons from one generation to the next.
Thank you. Abraham, your hand is up again, or you just didn't lower your hand?
Aubrey's looking. Aubrey.
No, my hand is not raised.
Okay, I'll lower it down. Carlos Basto, Portugal.
Thank you, David, and all the brethren, for an excellent evening and a very, very good presentation from Brother Robert. I have a quick question. Brother Robert, you talked about your national archives, and that there is an amount of documents that are not still studied, and I should ask why. Is there any kind of difficulty to study those documents, or are they being researched, and probably we'll have some other discoveries in a few years? Thank you.
Yeah, it's well, the first observation is, of course, the National Archive is a government department, and all the things all the things that go with that. It's just simply because there's just a huge amount of information. When I say that there's a huge amount uncatalogued, to be fair, when I was there, I mean, that was a good few years ago. I suspect a lot more has been catalogued now, especially because you can digitize the records, whereas before you just had to examine the actual piece of paper, record what it was, and all that kind of stuff. Everything was done with pen and paper. So I'll say that I'm not going to be critical about it not being catalogued. But the other problem that we have as Masons is that because it's a government department, they are not interested in whether the documents they've got are Masonic or not. Their job is simply to catalogue them, digitize them, and preserve them. So, you know, if they find a Masonic document, they don't pick up the phone and say, "You've got to come and look at this, Bob," you know. They just catalogue it and record the fact that they've seen it. So it's down to people like me to go through this stuff and hope I'm going to find something. Now, clearly that's just not possible. I mean, I could spend the rest of my life just looking at documents in the hope of finding something. But equally, all we can do is hope that other researchers who do find it will recognize that it's Masonic and get in touch. But other than that, yeah, there's no way of knowing what there is there. That's the problem.
Thank you. Frater Irar just mentioned regarding the sorry.
Aubrey's holding his hand up, his physical hand. Aubrey Winnie.
Okay, go ahead. And then Christian, be prepared. Floor will be yours. Aubrey.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to make an input. In Dumfries, there is the Speculative Lodge of Dumfries, number 140. Now the question is, no, not the speculative, the Operative Lodge of Dumfries, numbered 140. Are they speculative?
Well, that comes back to this very difficult problem. You see, when we say, and there's something like 6 or 8 lodges in Scotland that have the word operative in their title, it's really not a very good description for a lodge, because the implication is that the lodge is actually doing operative stonemasonry, but clearly it isn't. They're all speculatives, whether they're operative or not. And this is where it becomes very difficult. If somebody says the Masons built Rosslyn Chapel, I'm going, well, of course the Masons built Rosslyn Chapel, but what kind of Masons built Rosslyn Chapel? So essentially, you're right. If it's a lodge, it can't be an operative lodge, because they don't actually ever build anything in the lodge as a lodge. So it's a problem of definition. So it's far better to say it's a lodge of operative Masons rather than an operative lodge. But we've become very lackadaisical in the way we say things, basically. So a lodge of operative Masons tells you that it's a lodge of working stonemasons, but they must be speculative when they're in the lodge. It's clear as mud, isn't it?
Right, absolutely. The only thing is from what I understand, the members can only be members of the allied trades, the building trade, in the case of Dumfries.
Yeah. There's 6 lodges in Scotland that have that requirement to this day, where they get their initiates. Originally, they would only take stonemasons as initiates, even although the lodge was a lodge under the Grand Lodge of Scotland. They would only take initiates who were stonemasons. But as the stonemasons trade declined in terms of numbers, they widened that to people who work in the building industry or the construction industry. So now they will admit glaziers, plumbers, even bricklayers, dare I say it. So anybody who's connected to the trade of erecting buildings in any way is eligible to join that lodge. And this is them trying to maintain the connection with their operative forebearers.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Brother Bob. I guess you have microphone connected with the cable, maybe, because it started these strange sounds again. Could you say what? Yes.
Oh, wait a minute. It's, try reconnecting it.
Okay.
Is that better?
No.
It's not better.
We definitely have to collect some money to buy you a new microphone. That was a good idea, Abraham.
I think what it is, I've got like a webcam with a built-in mic. Let's see if we can. Is that any better?
No, same.
Oh. Okay.
That's fine. That's good now.
All right.
Good now.
Okay.
Okay. Let's run through the questions before I give floor to two persons. It is a follow-up kind of thought shared what Shiva asked. Perhaps they are. It was from Frater Irar. Perhaps the aristocracy, being Hermeticists, recognized the Hermetic nature of the Freemasonry. Could that be the motivation for them to join the lodges?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if although there is a gap in terms of time between William Shaw's time and the first known aristocrats. But yes, why not? Why not? Yeah, I mean that. And unfortunately, remember, we're going entirely on written records, but they could have been talking about this amongst themselves. So yes, that's quite possible.
Okay, thank you. Very good point made then. Cristian Torres, floor is yours. Chile.
Senor.
Hermano.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, Ori is past master of my lodge as well, Britannia, here in Santiago, Chile. So he's not in the UK as you might think. No, brother Rod, just to extend the invitation, I think I already told you this, but if you want to be a part of our South American Scottish group presentation that we have one this upcoming Monday at 7 p.m., well, midnight for you. It'll be each Monday, so if you have problems to sleep or anything, please, I'll send you the information via David, so you can have it.
Yeah, I'll check. I'll check my diary. No promises, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Oh,
no worries.
Okay. Okay, Cristian, thank you. Eduardo, okay, let's make these two questions and that's it. And I think we should wrap up the meeting. Otherwise, next time we'll have to have technical breaks, I guess. Each third hour is kind of closing, getting to the end. So, okay, please.
Two quick questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned is there any similarities between the early catechism that you came across and ones of other fraternities? And the reason I'm asking this, in the previous Roslin bits, I think, you mentioned other fraternities. My relation is, if the Masons started the lodge because in the corporation or guilds, it was too much for them to have a unique kind of space. Does this mean that maybe the carpenters had something similar and the plumbers had something similar who were in the builders corporation?
Well, that's a very good question, actually. I haven't
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that. Instead of looking at it that way, I think the question that's being asked is, if the stonemasons couldn't transmit their secrets in the guild,
yes,
right, what were the other trades in the guild doing with their secrets?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know.
Very good.
I don't know.
This is the first time we get, I don't know, straight, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
now,
a very
are there
good
other fraternities? Because when you were talking about the free gardeners thing,
yeah,
which I joined recently, and they said this is being revived from some executive in Scotland and so on. And
Yeah.
then you mentioned that there were many other similar fraternities as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, I think this is kind of unique to Scotland because, so, I mean, the fraternities that we know about, apart from the Freemasons, and of course it was 2 words, Freemasons, free gardeners, free fishermen, free carters, free wrights. Then you had the horsemen, the hammermen, and the squaremen. So, but these were all organizations that were closely related to the actual work that the members did for a living, the job they did during the day. So like the Freemasons, they would build something during the day and go to the lodge at night. So these organizations were very similar in that sense. Unfortunately, we don't know, I mean, the Free Gardeners is the best known one. Their minute books, I mean, they're almost as old as the lodge records here in Scotland. But that still doesn't answer the question about the other trades and how they transmitted their secrets. I know that the free wrights eventually had lodges of their own, but yeah, it's a very good question. I really don't know the answer to that one.
Could it be the case, because when you were mentioning that if you don't, we needed to admit what do you call them, aristocracy because of financial needs, could it be the case that those who refused actually failed, like lodges who refused to change end up failing?
Yeah, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, that's something I would have to try and examine. Instead of looking at lodges which we know exist, what we now need to do is look for lodges that don't exist now, which is a little bit more difficult, I have to say. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, I don't know. That opens all sorts of other issues. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I will shut up. Okay.
We'll have to think about that. Mm.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, for this very interesting intervention and question.
My pleasure.
Yeah. David, follow. I just don't see full name. He just left several times. He asked the same question. So let's kind of, it seems a bit procedural question regarding in the ritual. So let's give him recorded answer. Were the 3 key masters the source of requiring 3 specific personages be present to say a certain something? Which came first?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think the box masters or the key holders would be first, because the ritual always develops later. So yes, box masters first, and you can see the bit of the ritual we read about the 3 people. You know, I can't remember which question it was, but they ask, "Are there any jewels in your lodge?" And the answer is yes, 3, the Northwest Passage, and you know, and that is the Master, the Warden, and the Fellow of Craft. So this number 3 is a consistent and repetitive, even at this early stage. So yeah, I think I know exactly the 3 people you're referring to. So I think that may well have been part of the thinking to use 3, because they already had 3, and the ritual already had 3. So yeah, so strong possibility, I would say.
Thank you. Abraham wrote that he raised hand for David Felty, right? David Felty, just floor is yours, and I'll lower the hand of Abraham.
Okay, well, you just did it. That was my question. It struck me, and my ears immediately perked up.
It wasn't your question.
There were
okay.
3 locks. There were 3 locks on this box, and I wasn't thinking. I didn't go to the bone box, which has a role in what we call Scottish Rite here, but simply went to the 3 personages who were prevented from saying something if all three were not present. And it
Yeah.
always wondered me, well, why didn't the other two just say it? And we see here's the mystical, mythical, symbolic reason, because you got to unlock the box.
That's
That
right.
was the missing piece for me. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I couldn't say it, but you did. So.
So again, I guess I scrolled up and down. I have my team working with me as well, trying to catch all the questions. So to play fair and everyone has the floor. So I think we did our best in that regard. Everyone who wanted to ask something, again, the questions never end because there are so many questions and the dimension is so huge. Okay, we still missed one. My team tells me that we should ask that one too. Now that'll be fully fair and truly brotherly, I think. So, question to Brother Bob. Brother W. Jenkinson at AQC, Volume 50, mentions that in the charter granted by the Grand Lodge of Scotland to the old Kilwinning Lodge of Inverness declares, quote, members had received and entered apprentices, passed fellowcrafts, and raised master masons from 27th December 1678, quote ends. Is this proof for the Master Mason's degree in use by 1678 in Scotland? That's the question.
Well, that depends on whether anybody from Kilwinning Lodge is here tonight.
Should I ask as a moderator? Please don't be calm.
How it worked very simply is in 1736, the Grand Lodge asked everybody to state what their earliest records were. And that's where that's why this information was recorded. Later, they then said, okay, you say your earliest records are 16 whatever, and we see them, please. And then there was a problem because sometimes some of them had got mixed up as to what the actual date was. When the Grand Lodge gave that charter, it's what they call a charter of confirmation. When they gave Kilwinning that charter, they gave it, 60 years after the so-called event. If it was in Kilwinning's minutes, exactly as you've just said it, then that would be extremely interesting. I've got a copy of the minutes. I can have a look. I don't think, I can't remember ever actually saying anything like that in the actual minutes. So I think that would have been a statement given to Grand Lodge, and it was accepted as being accurate by Grand Lodge without necessarily them seeing the actual written evidence. Is that diplomatically enough put, do you think?
Pretty much, I
Tricky,
think.
a tricky one, as they say.
Thank you so much. I think we have done a great job. We should just say, I don't know, words cannot say so much gratitude, express so much gratitude towards Brother Bob for unending kind of like fountain, giving out all the information that he has gained for so many years. Huge applause to you and our gratitude. We still have almost 80 participants here. We got a lot of goodbyes with huge hugs and thank yous in the chat. And that proves how much valuable the information you share is for each of us. And thank you for that again and again. Once again, I'll just wrap up the meeting. All the questions have been asked. once again, before I wrap it, or meanwhile I wrap it, if anybody wants to leave his email, name, or whatever in the chat room, would it be public chat room or private my chat room? Well, we go through it, and don't worry, all the questions, remarks, and emails are noted, and we'll come back with that individually, or if it's something for everybody, for everyone. We got homework from Brother Bob regarding the measurements. We got Bob's promise to share his presentation, so everybody has it written while he will listen to this recording again and again, and we'll post it on the web as well. So thank you for participants. Thank you for the lecturer. Next lecture is on 5th of May. Also quite an interesting topic. And anything came up, Brother Bob? You were thinking aloud. Anything came up
Yes,
for the 5th?
Did we have a title?
Sorry?
Yeah. Did we have a title for the 5th?
Yes, yes. I'll just give it to you. 1 second. Oops. It was regarding the. It was regarding. That's the history. Also, to be very delicate, I guess, Freemasonry in Scotland and in England, 1717 to 1813. It would be a very interesting period for contemporary Freemasonry to learn more, explore more how it was, what was the premiere, what was the conflict, how they united, what was Scotland doing in between, so on and so on. So interesting stuff coming up for the next lecture. So again, I would like to thank the supporters of this initiative. We got some brothers from London actively supporting this initiative, which is very much appreciated. They will get their personal gratitudes here on the recording, and of course through the emails. Thank you for the members of Grand Lodge of Georgia and members of Grand Lodge of Lithuania for logistically and financially supporting all this stuff. And thank you for all the participants. If anybody wants to say just one word, kind of bye things. Otherwise, I will stop recording. Brother Bob, you want to kind of say bye?
No, thank you. Thank you all for listening.
Okay.
Very good.
So, recording is over.